another item on the research project. The floor is yours, Heather and Vanessa.
Heather will be our Vanessa, I'm not sure who's going to. Vanessa will be our spokesperson today. Are we? Oh, you are. Okay. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for making time for us. It's always a pleasure to be able to meet, and I know how busy everyone is. Heather and I have been following the events and all the very exciting news, and also the hard times that Hawaii's been dealing with. So our hearts and minds have been with everyone. We're just thinking of you all. So thank you for having us. So that said, what we're hoping to do today is there should be a briefing note in the package. There should also be a grant summary that looks like this. It says Social Science and Humanities Research Council of Canada on top. And in the background, it's just a brief sort of overview of the project that we are wrapping up, which was the 4 years of research to look at the implementation of the Nauru Treaty. It talked about some of the goals of that previous research there, essentially to document and to evaluate and keep track of really Hawaii's experience implementing the new relationship with the feds and the province. So that is wrapping up at the end of this year. And as I think we presented to council last year when we were visiting, putting in a new application, and we were talking about, do we want to continue doing this research? Is it of use? And people seemed to think that it was worth going forward. So we also put that to some community engagement sessions last year as well, asked citizens if they thought that the research was important, if they wanted to see us going forward. And just as a small reminder, we did a whole bunch of work in the last research project. We did interviews, I think about 60 interviews with white citizens, also with treaty negotiators from all sides of the table. We did photo voice with white citizens, ask about their experience with treaty implementation to date. We did surveys with white citizens as well, seeing how things were going, and that was largely based on the strategic plan that the way it had from 2016 to 2020, I believe. And all of those activities have been guided by an extremely fabulous advisory committee who have been directing us at all stages. So that's we have a whole bunch of things that we want to talk about sort of on the end here, but I'm trying to give a brief summary here. Heather is also reminding me, because there's so much that was going on, that we had support from Ayana Clappis and Becky Nookimis on the previous project, and from Jane Peters and Wish Key earlier on as well to help us conduct some of the research as part of that project. They were all absolutely fabulous. Those trainees provided a really unique experience for us and hopefully for them in terms of some research methods and hopefully supporting the nation in terms of having citizens more involved in the research. So with that said, I don't know if there's anything you want to add?
No.
Background?
Okay.
Say
this.
So all of that said, I'm happy to speak more about the background of the research. We have emailed 2 of the manuscripts that have been published to date on that research. Those aren't emails. We have hard copies here. They're quite lengthy, so we didn't know if everyone wanted them printed out. And we also have a full copy of the grant, which has been sent around to council members. We're happy to share that as well. It's about 100 pages long of grantalees speak, so we've only provided the summary here to hopefully not make your eyes roll in the back of your head. But long story short is that we were successful with that SHIRT grant. So we received almost $400,000 to continue doing research for the next 4 years into treaty. That proposal was developed in conversation with the advisory committee, as well as conversations we've had with council in terms of what people wanted to see. So what we're hoping to do in terms of this meeting is really to revisit some of the topics that we want to check in on, make sure we're being informed by council moving forward, making sure that we're taking the priority items from the nation and moving forward in the way that will best support Hawaiian through their implementation process. So before I move on, I just want to ask if anyone has questions, because I know this is a lot of information. I'm wanting to make sure that I'm making sense.
Just one comment that kind of helps me keep focused on where we're at, and that goes right back to the beginning when our treaty committee wanted us to basically identify 4 themes of what we saw in the treaty. And I always like to keep us focused on, because everything you bring up can go into one of those 4. And the 4 themes were cash. So it's always good to look at, you know, where were we? What was our financial position when we entered the treaty, and what is it today? When you look at that number, there's a very significant improvement there. So to me, from a financial perspective, that guides that. And then in terms of when you look at natural resources, you know, where were we prior to treaty and where are we today? And I know we're in a definite better position than we were, but at times to some people there isn't an improvement. And I think that's what we got to try to tackle, is what are some of the individual benefits in say natural resource development that we can start looking at, so that there's a benefit to individuals in the treaty. And then the other one was the governance, you know, the fact that we have our own laws, and we pass our own laws at legislature. We develop our own policies at executive council. And I think in a few times we've exercised, you know, if it's not working, let's change it. And that's one of the biggest things that goes with our ability to develop our own laws and our own policies. If it's not working, let's change it. And so, you know, those are the things that we, and then the other one was land. We've already increased the amount of land that we got in the treaty, and we also have a mechanism in the treaty that enables us to acquire more land. In other words, we can acquire more private land, and we can acquire more crown land. So those are the 4 main posts that I look at when I look at it. And then when you pick up anything, it fits into one of those 4. And so that's what I've always, at the high level, when I gauge where we are, what we're doing. So from a high level, I can always say that we are better off. But when you delve into some specifics, you could find that, you know, maybe we're not doing as well as you know, we should be. But we should never let that overtake the overall perspective. Are we better off when we went to the treaty? When you look at those 4 themes or posts or whatever we want to call them, those are what I use as a gauge when I look at, you know, is that policy or that decision making it better off for the people in the nation. Sure.
And just to add on to Robert, on the governance part that he mentioned, is that's built into that. Prior to treaty, there was no Hotway Council involvement. And so just to add on to what you're saying, that in that governing structure now today, that's something that's a big part of our way moving forward now, is the involvement of our hereditary chiefs.
Okay.
That's really helpful, I think, for us in terms of shaping some of the direction that we'll bring to the advisory committee that we're meeting with on Thursday. And, you know, the 4 big themes that you've talked of, I think one of the utilities of doing this research is that we have a chance to speak with citizens from within the TSL and outside the TSL about those things. And we tried to do that through interviews and the Photo Voice project, which is photography and storytelling, and the survey. So we're going to talk a little bit about what these methods might look like in the next 4 years. Some of them were more successful than others, so we're looking for some guidance about that as well, both from the advisory committee and from council and staff on that, because I think it helps, you know, when you see these big movements and positive things moving forward, when you have a chance to spend time and talk to individual citizens, because as you pointed out about the individual impacts, this is where we can sort of give back from the research to say, here's what we're hearing on the ground, to help in your own sort of big sky thinking. Yeah, so thank you, that's really helpful.
Yeah.
Do you want us to just go from here to keep on track? So on the briefing note, there's next steps. We have 5 items that we want to speak to. We've already kind of started talking about that, but just to keep me on track, I should say, I'll go through these. So the first question that we're really hoping to hear from council is on the composition of the advisory committee. So at the last project. We spoke with council at the time, and there is a suggestion for the advisory committee that steers the project to be arm's length from the government, and to be comprised of citizens that represent the diversity of Hue. So at the moment, we have Cletion, who's been providing the Hawiah Council voice. Edward Jr. has been providing an Nanaimo and Port Alberni voice. We have Jane Peters and Stella Peters, who have been representing and providing an Aqua voice. We have Mercedes Williams as a youth representative and also representing the mainland. And Simon Dennis, who is also the elder voice and representing the mainland as well. So our first hope and ask for input from council is to talk about the composition of the advisory committee and confirm that is arm's length still what the council is advising in terms of moving forward.
Yeah. Mhm.
Chair, can I ask a question? I noticed there wasn't a voice, there was no one that seemed to put the age group or the voice of anyone who had a young family on there, and I'd like to suggest council maybe thinks about adding a voice that is young family, because a lot of our policy decisions affect education and childcare, and we've been putting a lot of focus on education and job opportunity.
We were also just in conversation and planning for today's meeting, thinking about the need to have an additional youth representative on the committee, because I know all of this work is for next generations, and so we were thinking it might be a good idea to have somebody, whether it's a youth perspective from the treaty settlement land, somebody who's living there presently, or somebody who's had to leave recently in order to go to school or something like that. But we were thinking about that.
We don't
as
consider
well.
Edward Johnson youth anymore?
I think it's the 39.
Yeah.
Well, and to add on what Crystal was saying too, I think Simon Dennis is looking after a number of his grandchildren, I think, as well. But also in Vancouver, there's different people, and this is something that we're hearing over and over again, which is so completely different for citizens who are living in
Mercedes is
different.
his granddaughter.
Yeah, exactly. So it's I think the young family voice, even in TSL versus NACLA or Parkville, would be a very good thing to consider.
Do you have anybody in mind?
Young families?
No.
It's like, yeah.
Well,
Since
Young
I'm not
family
considered
in Port Alberni or Knoxville would be a really good choice.
But I was questioning, because I was reading, and it talks about the advisory committee and talking about the our relationship from the beginning, pre-treaty and through treaty, and where we're at right now, and asking the guidance of next steps, but then I couldn't get out of my mind of the reason behind the advisory committee was to keep it separate from government and council. So then I was questioning myself, and then on what I should do. So then knowing how to either remove myself or how to go forward with that. That was my question when I was rereading things last night.
You had to go and get elected.
Okay, Connie and then John?
Yeah.
I didn't know who was first, so ladies first.
I think it's important to keep it separate, because your role will now be at this table, and so to be consistent in the work that we're doing. Not saying you're not beneficial,
Oh,
but
yeah.
you'll be beneficial
Yeah.
at this
Yeah.
level. Yeah. So.
I think I should. It's just there weighing in the back of my mind, because I know the meeting's coming up on Thursday, and just knowing I'm very passionate about it, but I think it's a good thing where I am right now, and I think we might have to look for a new member. Sad face.
Yeah.
So then in terms of number one, the composition of the committee, then are we saying then would be Simon, Keisha, Mercedes, Stella, Jane, plus another youth? That, John?
So I was thinking we might want to take a process to go and ask, but I have a few people in mind that could fill the youth role fairly readily.
Mhm.
I don't know where any of them live anymore, but I'm thinking of people like Becky Nutmus or Yana Clappis or
Rachel Young?
Rachel. Yeah, I didn't want to push her forward. But when I heard young family, it was kind of front of mind. Yeah. The only other idea would be to have a process, but then I don't know what you would need for timing. So I didn't hear that, or I was busy actually reading what you wrote.
No worries, yeah. The timing, I mean, yes, we have our next advisory committee meetings on Thursday, but I also see that as a wrapping up meeting from the previous project, and not necessarily, depending on whether or not we have people in place for Thursday, but it means the new one starts. We can certainly have that happen down the road. The other thought we also had, things that Vanessa mentioned, that represented the diversity of the nation. We were thinking about houses. Do we have representation from the houses? Do we have gendered representation, age representation, so life experience, that kind of thing, just to sort of put other ideas out there on who might be appropriate to bring in.
John?
I would just ask that maybe if the last meeting is on Thursday, that Eddie, maybe you do go, just kind of
Yeah.
as a debrief, anything you want to add, because then that's a clean break at that point. Yeah.
So we'll keep you there.
Why don't we just do a
I think,
call out?
so we need to walk out here today, the composition of the advisory committee will stay intact, and we'll add someone else. Is that your understanding then?
Sure. And you were thinking of a call out
Yeah. Yeah.
to see is there somebody
Will
who
do.
would like to do
A
it?
call out, do a call out,
Oh.
like what we do for committees.
Okay.
Okay.
With members, should we be, what am I trying to say here? Sorry, I'm still wrapping my head around the room.
House.
Do people feel that the House representation is something that's covered and named? Because I think we selected people specifically last time, I think, speaking with Robert as well, but we did do a call out.
Yeah.
Just want to make sure that everything's
Yeah.
looking good moving forward.
What do we call the one between youth and elder?
Middle age.
Middle-aged person.
Middle-aged. From the memo. I
John?
From a house perspective, I can think of a few kind of complicating factors, because I can think of some houses that candidates don't jump to mind. So if that's something that Derek and the Hot Wheel want to cover off, then that can be part of the call out. I'm, from a personal perspective, really, I'm comfortable with Derek covering that off on behalf of all the houses until we have a wider understanding across the nation. But that's up to them more than it is to us, I think. So.
Yeah, I agree. I think that we can cover that off. Whatever it is.
So the action is that we would do a call out for one.
Yeah, we'll do call out
member.
for youth, and so Simon, I assume, is an elder, right, on that? And Mercedes is youth, but we're calling for another youth representative. And Stella and Jane will stay on that. Okay? And right, Jane? Yep.
Number 3? So 1 and 2 were covered together. We have number 3 here is asking for guidance at this early stage of priority topics identified by Hawaiian First Nations Executive Council, to which the research team should focus, as our research is always intended to prioritize Hawaiian First Nations. So we've heard some of the 4 overarching themes that Robert was mentioning. If there's anything that comes to mind that we can specifically look at, or any direction that people have, we're very happy to hear it.
Can you run over this again?
Oh, wait, there was one thing I've always said this to Trevor. I always looked at the treaty as the economic development plan. That was me at my occupying the desk. John, did you want to say something?
Yeah, could you cover off the 4 main again?
Land,
Yeah.
cash,
Yeah.
natural resource, and governance.
Kind of culture and heritage. I'm just thinking of all the finance
Well,
categories.
when you look at treaty, culture and heritage, went under governance. Yeah. So when you look at how the treaty is completed, yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of things under governance,
Mhm.
programs and services. The only other one that I would add is economic development. It might be separate.
I think so.
But one could argue economic development is cash, right?
Yeah, I was just, I was looking at my notes. I'm like,
Yeah, it breaks down to 4. We spent a lot of time picking out those 4.
yeah, yeah,
A lot of discussion.
yeah.
Of course, we had a really hard-nosed facilitator that would say, I believe that goes under natural resources, Robert. Okay. That hard-nosed facilitator was George Watts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Didn't matter what anybody said.
That makes more sense to me now. Okay.
How about maybe something that captures our, because of where we are, because of the treaty, our strengthened relationship with the government in general and relationships. Maybe give some thought around that, because under the INAC structure, we didn't have the opportunity to reach out to where we are now in terms of, one, we have a political strategy today. Prior to that, we couldn't really have one, right? It was just with us and INAC. And I don't know, just something, just wanted to flag, maybe that could be some area where we put some focus on in terms of, going through that process of the negotiations and what it means to us today as a governing nation. That it's more, it's at government to government level now. Under INAC, it wasn't government to government level.
You're saying reconciliation?
Yeah, that's like, to me, that's part of what Derek's talking about.
Yeah.
And that's a good reminder that one thing we are going to be asking and flagging is, as part of the last research, we started off by doing interviews with Kuwait leadership, federal, provincial government, and the Maui negotiation team at the time. Not at the time, I guess, afterwards. That would have been post-implementation. So we're hoping to do that again. Sort of 6 months out now. It's almost been 10 years since implementation. So we might be following up with an email with a lot of people in this room to talk about that, and then we can do the same with the feds in the province to see where we're at now. And that could capture some of that relation, because there's been so much that has changed, and you signed an agreement with the province as well, wasn't there, another one? Yeah.
And the reason why I kind of mentioned that, because when I look back and where we are now, I think about, for example, the road issue. That's not something that's new to us today. It's something that's been amongst us it was at the negotiating table when we were there, and it didn't come to reality then. But we've progressed forward now to today because of our treaty and the tools in our treaty box that we describe it as. We're able to have these discussions and build these relationships now that improve our community as a nation, improve our economy because of the things that we're doing in economic development now. So we've got more attention and more focus and relationships built around that now today than we did then. So like the road issue now, the reason why it's getting headway is because we're we have the resources to do it now, for one. And so we have more control over where we want to go as a nation, as opposed to, you know,
Language,
Ottawa
culture,
dictating to us where
I
what they
can't
think the
think
best
what
interest is for us.
Actually, I want to make one more comment. I think language and culture should be one by itself,
Yeah.
because I think it's got a broad enough things that we got to do in there. I mean, the spirituality, the dancing, the language, you know, the sacred ceremonies that we conduct. It's a really wide variety, so I think it should be by itself. One of the priority areas. If that's what you're referring to.
Yeah, absolutely.
Robert,
Con?
so just what you're saying, that I think that's a really key point, because it ties right to our ancient spirit, modern mind.
Yeah, yeah.
So it wraps it all up.
Yeah.
Okay.
I guess the only other thing I would add there for this one around priorities, one of the things that I remember very strongly from our conversations right after the treaty went into effect, everybody at the negotiation table from the province and the feds left and new people came in. And you mentioned about relationships, and just wondering, you know, if you have a couple of comments on how are things going in those relationships now that you've had more time in them. Do you see things improving? Are there things that you're really frustrated about with trying to do your implementation because of hamstrings by either the province or the feds?
It's horrible.
Oh, okay.
I'm really glad you mentioned that, Heather, because I remember some of the Niska used to view their treaty as actually was seen as a divorce.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I heard that.
Yes.
Where it actually, it shouldn't be. It should be, how do we enhance that relationship that makes, you know, there's an improved government to government.
Yeah.
So I support that. So we're adding 2 more now, I think, more priority.
It actually ends up being more because people talk about INAC being almost the foster child to the government. Being now, rather than a divorce, it's actually more a marriage.
Yeah.
This idea of what the relationship
Exactly.
is.
Yeah.
So what I would say, just as an initial comment, would be that conversations that are being had from the provincial and federal government are still in the way that we still are in Indian Act.
Yeah.
I think that's just partially because they don't know through their own systems what it actually means to have a government-to-government relationship with treaty nations,
Yeah.
and how they conduct business in that. It's easy to negotiate agreements, but then once you get to the idea of like, okay, this is how it works within the system, it's like,
Yeah.
well, our system wasn't geared to do it. So.
Okay.
Well,
So
anyway,
it's still
no.
not at all better.
We need more
We need marriage counseling.
One of my goals that hopefully 50 years later, somebody might quote me.
Okay, thank you.
Not that I have anything that's quotable. Oh, my favorite is, come on, get in our canoe. Heart of the people.
So with those two, was there 2 additions that we made there?
Yeah, language and culture.
Yeah, okay, so,
And then-
so on that, I'd like to suggest that Brittany be part of the advisory group, and Whiskey, and Jeff to take over my role at that level.
Okay.
Yeah.
You know, so,
Well, I'm good with, because I know where the direction we're going in, and I'm good with that, and Jeff has a lot of insight too as well in terms of, so he's tapped right into, so I'm comfortable with Jeff taking that position on, and Whiskey with our culture, and Brittany with her language efforts that she's invested in, will be a benefit to our advisory community.
I just want to finish with there's something I still envision and hope it happens. You know, when we follow the current system you know, where we gotta register with, what's it called? The provincial statistics of
Oh.
whatever they are, you gotta register your name. And I still envision the day that every house leader is going to hold an annual potlatch to give every one of their people in their house a Hawaiian name. Because that's what identifies and connects us to who we are. And I always like what my son said. I really, no disrespect to my father, I like my name Robert Dennis Jr., but I'm more proud to wear the name Wishki. And to me that means a lot. Because to me he's saying, I'm Hawaiian. I want a Hawaiian name. So I just want to, like, that's really important for me, and I hope it happens that every year we're going to be having a potlatch that's giving all those that aren't named, we're giving them a name, as was our tradition. And when we held our potlatches, you know, you were known by your name wherever you went. And, so that's I just wanted that's important to me. That happened.
I'm aware of the time, and we probably need to move along. So number 4 item was just around asking if you have some thoughts about potential Kuwait trainees that we could recruit to help us with the research over the years. We do have a meeting with
Andrea.
Brent, Andrea.
Oh, there's somebody to tap into. She's just waiting to be.
Who's Andrea?
Andrea, what's her last name?
Lucas.
Lucas, yeah.
Was that Lucas? Andrea?
Yeah. Rachel, I'd like to see Rachel involved. I mean,
Rachel.
untapped resource.
All right. We're signed up.
Rachel's a doer. That's what I feel. And that's what we need. People that want to get things done.
Great.
Don't let me down, Rachel. When we get home, she'll be going like that.
I burned the midnight oil to get it done already.
Okay.
All right, and then number 5, the last item, was just to confirm how you would like us to continue to provide updates and ask for guidance from you as well. As our advisory committee, we have a terms of reference with our advisory committee that we're going to review on Thursday, and potentially make some revisions. But do you want to have a briefing note at every council meeting? What have we done? What haven't we done? How often would you like to see us? And that kind of thing.
John?
Maybe a monthly update, just written, and then quarterly visits.
Monthly update.
So like monthly?
One page.
One page?
Yeah, 1 page would be fine.
Monthly update.
Sorry, I thought you were holding like 4 pages.
So quarterly visit on the agenda?
Yes.
Yeah.
The monthly is the 10 bullets.
Yeah, we can definitely do 10 bullets,
Yeah.
no problem.
How much time do I have remaining?
Right now?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Probably 0. I don't
We've
know.
surpassed.
Yes.
It's 110.
No, I mean in research for the money.
Oh.
How much money do you have?
4 years.
4 years?
Yeah, 4
4 years.
We
Yeah.
have 4 New Years, yeah.
They got the grant.
400 or 374,
Yeah.
2019, 2023. Okay, is
Okay.
that covered?
And would you like us to say anything at the People's Assembly? Or can we have somebody from the advisory committee say something at the advisory committee, or at the People's Assembly about the
I
work?
think it would be good if you and the advisory committee were called up. So people we can showcase who the committee is. And then if there's a dialogue that needs to happen outside of that presentation, people know who to see.
And
October 19th.
On the,
She may be here, I may not be able to make it.
I heard there's been a specific request that you both attend. I'm just kidding.
See you October. I hear you loud and clear. Wonderful. Thank you so much for your time and important insights for us to move forward over the next 4 years. You'll get our monthly updates, and we'll see you in a few months, if not sooner, like October 19th.
Yeah, and I just want to say, it helps us to have kind of an outside gauge of how we're doing and how we should be prioritizing what we can do. I always like that when we get an outside view of how we're doing. Outside, I mean that you're not involved in the day-to-day. You get to see, look at from afar, see how we're doing.
That just reminds me of one thing that we didn't put on here, and that was around the treaty implementation committee. Over the last 8 years, I suppose, if we would be able to request permission to look at some of the minutes, or all of the minutes over that period of time, just to have a look at what's being discussed at the committee level, and if there's any insights we can glean from that.
Yeah, they both raised their eyebrow. The one on the chair of the committee,
Yeah.
and the boss of the chair, if you want to say, but the boss of the worker. I don't know how they do it,
We don't talk about work.
Okay, they're on the treaty implementation committee, John and Crystal.
Okay, great. Wonderful. Thank
Thank you
you.
very much.
One-stop shopping, eh?
Right on.